Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. My name's Leo Sarley. I'm with the Planning Commission. I am chairing in lieu of Mr. Lantelmi, who could not make it this evening. With that, I will start with the remarks, and then we will roll into the second LRPC for this project. And the discussion topics today are phasing update, transportation, green ribbon, and community benefits after a couple presentations. With that, let me dive into this text that we usually have to read before the beginning of every meeting. Welcome to the February 21st, 2024 Long Range Planning Committee subgroup meeting for the Pentagon Center PDSP amendment. We will be holding a hybrid public meeting which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia for the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7, 2022. Members of the LRPC subgroup for Pentagon Center are participating both here in person and virtually through electronic means. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to the hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the LRPC webpage, project page, the county's events calendar, and the email notification sent to LRPC email. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address when it's appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes: for the LRPC subgroup members who need technical assistance and for members of the public to add their names for the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of the meeting. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who are planning to provide public comment will still need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat will not serve as that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. If the subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the discussion during the course of the meeting, please turn your video feed and raise the virtual hand in Teams. I will monitor the video feed that are not on as an indicator of who would like to speak. That are on, sorry, I put a not in there, so that didn't make sense. So, just turn it on if you want to speak. If subgroup members are participating via phone today without the video option, please announce your name and group you are representing now, and we'll verbally check to see if you wish to be recognized, as you do not have a video feed option. Do we have any phone participants?
No.
Great. For our members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment, you will be called upon to speak at the end of the meeting and will be allotted 2 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat for virtual attendees or provide staff with your name if in person. You will be added to the speakers list. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meetings will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act's requirement. Okay, with that, let's do a couple introductions. We'll go around the room. And then we'll see who's online, and then we'll go to staff presentation, and then the applicant presentation. Great. I am Leo Sarley with the Planning Commission, and I am sitting for Mr. Lantelmi.
I am Greg Reed, and I'm with Kimco Realty.
Abby Oakback, also with Kimco Realty.
Evan Pritchard, I'm the applicant's land use attorney. Mike Binkowski with VICA.
Gary Shinners, Park and Recreation Commission. I'm Benson with the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission. I'm back up to Carolyn Haynes, who's here virtually.
Tony Strider with the Planning Commission.
And Ben Hunt with Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Chris Lamp with the Transportation Commission.
Let's go ahead and start. Matt Matuzek with the Planning Division.
Chrissy Wallentush, Planning Division.
Joanne Gabor, DES.
Jeff Williams, I'm a resident neighbor, member of ARCA, but I'm not a roster.
Thanks for coming. Quick clarification, are you the natural resources rep, or is
Carolyn?
Carolyn, all right. So she will be speaking tonight, not you, correct? Just making sure. Thanks. All right, online, who do we have?
Hi, I'm Alyssa Gardner from Aurora Highlands.
Hi, Mike Dow from Crystal and Pentagon Cities Council.
I'm Carol Fuller from Crystal City Civic Association.
Hi, Ben Devanzo representing Southampton Condominiums.
Carolyn Haynes, Forestry and Natural Resource Commission.
That it?
Karen Guevara, Planning Commission.
All right, last call for members at the table.
Emily Peterson, Planning Commission.
Great. All right, with that, I will turn it over to staff for the kickoff presentation. Thank you all for coming.
Sorry, give me just 1 second. Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming again. I'm Chrissy Wallentish with the Planning Division. So this is the second meeting of the LRPC for Pentagon Center PDSP amendment. I'm just going to provide a couple reintroduction slides since it's been a couple months since we had our first LRPC meeting on this project. So these should look familiar, but just to refresh you what we're here discussing and what we'll be discussing specifically today. So this is the agenda for this meeting. We, of course, will have the staff and applicant presentation. The discussion topics will be an update on the phasing, transportation, including streetscape and bicycle network, and as well as streetscape designs, and then an update on, just some an additional conversation on the green ribbon. If you remember, we did discuss this at the first LRPC, but some details have come up that we just want to kind of reintroduce to the LRPC and elicit some feedback. And then finally, we'll discuss community benefits and then move into the public comment portion of the meeting. Okay, so as a reminder to folks, what we're here to review, the applicant has submitted an application to revise the Pentagon Center PDSP to make general changes to the site layout, density, building height, open space, and various transportation-related aspects of the PDSP. This was last amended in 2015, originally approved in 2008. At this time, the request does not include a final site plan for any specific building or block development. So this public review process is intended to focus on the more high-level changes that are being proposed. This slide shows the high-level changes to building placement, use type, height, as well as location of open space. So just as a refresher, we went into a little more detail on this during the first LRPC. We also went into more detail on this, but just so it's fresh in everyone's mind, these are the Pentagon Center guiding principles, which were established in 2008 with the original PDSP approval in order to specify the goals and objectives for the site in the 9 areas of redevelopment that are listed on this slide. We will be looking to evaluate the proposed PDSP amendments conformity with these guiding principles. And then also, again, as a reminder, the site is the hole in the donut of the Pentagon City sector plan. It's surrounded in its entirety by the sector plan, but the site itself is not located within the sector plan. Although Pentagon Center is not located in the sector plan boundaries, the sector plan utilized the 2015 Pentagon Center PDSP framework to plan for surrounding the area that is located in the sector plan. We've identified certain aspects of the sector plan that are appropriate to apply to the Pentagon Center PDSP application, which we discussed again in the first LRPC and will continue to discuss today in regards to transportation and community benefits. So again, to help guide our review of the proposal in the context of the sector plan, we have the 6 guiding principles. One question to keep in mind is how the proposed PDSP amendment helps to fulfill these guiding principles or to identify if there are aspects of the proposal that fall short of these goals. Getting into our first discussion topic, we'll go over a quick update on the proposed phasing. As a result of the discussion during the first LRPC meeting, staff raised 2 concerns to the applicant regarding the phasing. First issue being that the phasing did not account for a scenario in which Costco could decide to extend their lease past the current expiration date. And the second being that it pushed the deliverance of all open space for the block to occur within phase 2, avoiding any near-term benefits to the community within phase 1. So as a result of that, we met with Kimco and we discussed a couple options to help alleviate these concerns. Kimco has agreed to revise the phasing so that the B1 block delivers an interim public open space along South H Street within phase 1, and then the office building proposed on B1 will be pushed to phase 2. So that's shown here, and then the Kimco's presentation will have more information on this. A development condition will require that the public open space remain in place until phase 2 is under development, which will deliver then the remainder of the open space on the western portion of the site. So this just ensures the site isn't developed with any lack of open space throughout the entirety of the project, that full build out. Okay, moving over to transportation phasing impacts.
So I can jump in on these. As you can see, a lot of what's being shown here resembles the 2015 vision. The phasing impacts, however, I think are going to be very critical to establishing some of the initial street network improvements. I'm not going to read through all these points, but you can see here how some of that initial grid improvement, particularly on the eastern side of the block, is likely to be implemented in the next phase, the B1 residential building that Chrissy just noted to. Currently, I think there's a street separating the interim park space from the B1 building. I think once that site plan is filed, we have a better chance to evaluate whether or not that street is actually necessary, and maybe potentially could expand the park space there. Considering that 2 additional segments, 13th and 14th, are being introduced with that phase, as well as the Grant Street segment that would continue north-south throughout the block. So depending on what the details are of that site plan, that might inform the exhibit that you see here, any kind of further evolutions that might exist. Next slide. Taking a step back for the entire block, one extra.
Okay.
Again, we mentioned that a lot of the grid network enhancements are similar to the 2015 vision, primarily utilizing this block to connect from Hay Street onto Fern and the surrounding blocks. So I think that consistency allows us to feel much more comfortable in terms of the alignment of 13th and 14th Road, as well as Grant. However, as those additional segments are implemented, one of the things we're going to pay careful attention to with each individual site plan, depending on where we are, we're either going to have to figure out and assess the existing conditions with the 2 first projects that have been delivered, the residential towers along Hayes, and how those streetscape needs to essentially continue on both 12th Street and 15th Street. And then as the additional segments are provided, we'll have a better chance to look at loading, on-street parking, and some of the other connectivity that's there. But again, at this stage, given that we don't have a specific project, most importantly, the next one, all we can do is essentially identify the orientation of the streets and continue to emphasize that they will help with the connectivity for this entire block. Next slide. Similarly, at a block level, borrowing from the Pentagon City Sector Plan, which presented a pretty robust network for the bike facilities in the area. You can see here our Fern Street and 15th Street would be accommodating future segments of those facilities. We are not anticipating anything along Hayes because that segment has been called for on the western side of Hayes, not the side where the block subject site is located, as well as 12th Street, where the transitway will be prioritized there, and 11th Street further north will be delivering additional segments. So this kind of gives you a perspective of how does this particular block fit into the broader bike network that's planned for Pentagon City. Next slide. And then lastly, from a transportation perspective, the streetscape designs are also borrowing heavily from the Pentagon City Sector Plan. Similar segments, whether it's 15th, Fern, and surrounding properties, are specified in that document in terms of the expectation for sidewalks and streetscape environment details. As I mentioned before, depending on where we are and which phase of development we're reviewing, we're going to be looking to amend that guidance as well as consider and align with existing conditions that have already been constructed with the first 2 projects on this block. So depending on where we are in the phase of development we're looking at, that assessment is still ahead of us at such time as we receive an actual site plan that has more details and allows us to assess what's appropriate. Next slide. Shifting gears from transportation, we did also want to note the Green Ribbon Network and how this block helps contribute to the additional connectivity. The Pentagon City Sector Plan at the time was utilizing the 2015 vision for this block, which led to and informed the alignment of that green ribbon to continue to follow future segments of 14th Street as it reached the southeast corner of the property where future park space was allocated. Given that the open space is being reoriented and reallocated throughout the block, that really poses an interesting question of whether or not 13th or 14th Street should be more appropriate to deliver that green ribbon connectivity and allow folks to traverse the site from east to west. And so again, I think with this next phase of development, likely looking at the Hay Street B1 property that we saw earlier, as that site plan is filed, we may learn more and be able to identify which of the two streets, 13th or 14th, is more appropriate to not only provide access throughout the site and to the future open spaces, but also allow for a better connection into Met Park, as well as most convenient access across Hay Street, which is pretty challenging, particularly since we're not expecting the west side of Hay Street to develop anytime soon. So those, again, additional variables that would help us identify that route. And then similarly, the relationship that that route may have to on-street parking, the width of the different streets, and how we can achieve that incrementally is going to be the subject of the site plan review process when the 4.1 application is filed. So we just wanted to highlight that and acknowledge that there's only limited guidance we can provide at this stage with PDSP. And we're going to be carrying on the expectation as we look at the next slide that in addition to the public open spaces, the green ribbon segments are expected to be accommodated on this block. Part of the community benefit structure, similar to what we have in Pentagon City, will be not just the design and construction, but also maintenance of those public amenities throughout the entire block. In addition to LEED Gold certification or higher, there is also a pretty explicit expectation for on-site affordability. We felt that this exhibit here in the table, which documents the additional residential density that's called for in the PDSP update, is a good way to highlight the approximation of what the on-site committed affordable units might be when factoring in where we landed in the 2015 discussions and that density level and what's being proposed up above and beyond that. So this gives you a sense of what that commitment could be based on the information that's been submitted. And again, we're going to be continuing to work and make sure that there's an incremental approach to delivery of these various benefits with each phase of development, most notably the open space, which is a critical element for this entire block. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chrissy.
Okay, so we are anticipating for this to be the second of two LRPC meetings to review this PDSP amendment. Applicant will resubmit their PDSP plans that will address feedback received during LRPC and based on comments received by county staff during our internal review of the application. The project will then move on to commission and advisory group meetings, followed by county board action, which as of now we anticipate to occur in late spring, early summer. And that concludes staff's presentation, so we'll turn it on over to the applicant.
This is big enough. All right, so welcome, everybody. Thanks for having us again tonight. We appreciate your time. Do you want to give a brief introduction? We can obviously, given the update that Chrissy did, Chrissy and Matt, we have, it's going to be slow. We have kind of some updates to kind of talk about on our end. Looks like it's not gonna. I've already changed slides on my computer.
I won't let you advance.
Well, my Wi-Fi isn't very strong in here, and I'm wondering if that's.
Maybe, Chrissy, do you have?
I have what you sent me on Friday, if that's.
Yeah, we haven't changed it.
Okay.
You want to? Oh, well.
Just a little behind.
It's very behind.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you share and then we'll go from there.
Sure.
It's worth the wait.
Excited.
Hang on.
Feels like an art history class. Interpret, what's the meaning?
The slow slides are coming up.
Hang on one second, I'm sorry.
Sketch from memory.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
All right.
I don't know. Hold on. All right. Okay. All right. I think I got it.
Oh.
Okay.
Yay. All right.
Thank you.
You can go to the first slide or the next slide. We did want to kind of remind everybody what kind of the overall is, just to kind of orient everybody again. So obviously you can see the metro station is located right next to Tower A, which is the Whitmer that opened in 2018. Block C is kind of down at the bottom of the page, and that is the Milton that opened last June. And so really what we're talking about is the remainder of the site in between. Today consists of what we consider the mall, which is Best Buy, Nordstrom Rack, Marshalls, Five Below, CVS, Newell, as well as then the Costco itself, as well as its Precast parking garage. You can go to the next slide. So really, Chrissy really covered this, the phasing. Go to the next one as well. And so again, this is that phase 1 plan. And really the idea is that B and B1 would be the first things that happen with the interim park on the office portion of the B1 parcel. Again, as a reminder, Costco has over 20 years of control. However, that doesn't mean that they couldn't leave in those 20 years, right? So again, we are setting ourselves up for the future if they decide to leave earlier. However, we are also setting ourselves up if they decide to stay the entire length of their time. Next slide. Again, here is kind of the full build out, and what we wanted to just kind of give you is a scenario of what we think a phasing option would be. Again, obviously this is pie in the sky today, but the idea would be that after phase 1 is construction with the interim park, what would happen next is potentially we would open a portion of the park on this scenario says on block F. So the idea is that we would open a portion of the park that is as big, if not bigger, than the interim open space. And then at that point in time, potentially the D residential and park would also kind of be under construction. And then the phase 2B would be kind of the office building on B1, and then the hotel and residential tower on F after the park opens in the previous phase, and then the final portion could potentially be the office building and the park on E. So the idea is that there is a staggering, but as long as the open space, the interim open space is replaced before a B1 goes, that would really be our proposed phasing here. Next slide. So really, this is a little hard to read on the screen, but what we wanted to share is this, what would happen with the building if there is parking access off this interim road. And so on the left, you can see that the garage is entered kind of off the interim road. And then in the future phase on the right in the box, you can see that basically it adds a turn down to the south. So again, we're still trying to, we're still quite a ways off from deciding this, but we do want to leave the flexibility for this because we do think in the long term, having a ramp entrance across from the park is not the best ideal scenario, right? So we would like to leave the flexibility for this just in case as we figure the details out as we move forward. Again, nothing has really been finalized and we'll continue as we move to the site plan with this in the future.
So just keep in mind, from looking at this view, the Milton, the newest building, is on the bottom of this page, and its loading already faces this loading, which is why we thought it's important to load here on 14th Street, because we already have loading there. And then that gives us the ability on 13th Street to make it more of a retail street and not have the interruptions you're going to have with the loading, all that. So that was our thought process, in this of how this building would load to mirror what we already have today.
So that really, and we'll talk about that as we move forward too, but that really makes that portion of 14th Street a service street, right? And so you have the service back to back. And then we create hopefully what's a great retail environment on 14th Street that gives us kind of back and forth retail on that. Are there any questions on phasing? Because I think this is our last phasing slide.
Not yet.
Okay, all right.
Well, just before you leave that, Abby, is it worth pointing out that interim street we're showing kind of tees up with the existing pathway that connects from the metro to the Milton, right?
Yes, so the path actually, it's just left, it would just be left to where the muse, what we call the muse is, from the existing Milton. It does kind of go to the right a little bit, and so the end goal would be that basically that connects you to the future residential amenity lobby of the future building. And so that's where the connection will take you after the mall goes away. All right, we can go to the next slide, which is really transportation, and then the next one. So here is kind of the maps, if you will, from our design guidelines. So you can see what we're thinking about both with the streets as well as the bike lanes. So on the left, you can see that we're thinking about Hayes, Fern, 15th and 12th as arterial streets. And then we've got local streets, both Grant Street and 13th Street. And then really we're thinking of 14th as our service street like we just talked about. And as you can see, we're adding the dedicated protected bike lane on Fern Street as well as on 15th, where the new development will happen, where we can pull the building back. There is a bike lane today that was added with the Milton on that portion of 15th Street. We don't have the section at this point in time to be able to add it protected, but the rest of it would be. And then obviously Hayes Street exists today, and then we would be providing kind of hopefully slow streets for Sharrows through the middle of the site. Next slide, please. The goal really is we really just wanted to let you know how much it's, almost over 16,000 linear feet of new protected bike lanes, which is 1/3 of a mile. And really, we do want to make sure that we are coordinating with the 12th Street Transitway. So we are working with staff to make sure 12th Street works as that gets added in the future. So we'll be having some coordination with the staff, but our next application will fully have all of that details because they shared the latest plans with us. So next slide. Really, this is kind of basically what we've already talked about, but the goal is that we're fully creating a porous 6 blocks rather than the super block there is today. And so you can actually skip 2 slides because I think the next one just says grant, which we've already talked about. And so here is the street sections. Again, these are pulled from our design guidelines as well as from the document set. And so the big thing here is what we've really done is we've added increased width for the step off from the parallel parking. So basically, instead of just a 6-inch curb, you now have 14 inches before you start the 6 foot for the tree planting zone. The other big difference is what we're saying is a variation from a building zone of 2 feet to 20 feet. And that allows for the vibrancy to have outdoor dining in specific locations, as well as kind of an undulation of buildings for where entry points are. And so really that's kind of the big point. And so overall the building could be, building face to building face could be somewhere around 100 feet if the full 20 feet is used on both sides. And then we did want to mention that while we are showing parallel parking on both sides, there is an opportunity at the parks and on our retail street to close it for events. So we could have the ability to create kind of celebration streets in those environments. Next slide, please. So this is what would happen at 14th Street, which is where the Milton already is today. And so for those of you who have walked down the street, basically where the trench drain is, from that point would stay kind of south. And then north, we would adjust the lanes and add parallel parking and a new curb and then kind of a new sidewalk on the north side of 14th Street. And so really right now, I'm sure if you have walked down there, you realize there's not really a sidewalk, at least going towards Costco on the north side. This would fully fix that, as well as provide kind of a real street section. And so we did want to show that for everybody here. Next slide. You can go ahead and go, we can look at the street sections for Fern. Next slide. Okay, so the top street section on your right here is what was approved in the 2015 plan. And as you can see, no bike lanes were anticipated. And really it just went to the property line. And so now you can see in the proposed one at the bottom that what we've done is we've increased the dedication in order to add the 6-foot bike lane and the 4-foot buffer. We don't have a dimension on how much this is because it does vary. The property line is not parallel to the roadway, but that is in the document set for where that is. If you go to the next slide, the thing that's interesting to us is while we have not shown the bike lane on the other side of the street because it is not our property and we don't know that we would be able to redo the curb, it does fit within the street section. So the anticipation is that once Costco goes away, you no longer need the center left-right lane. And at that point, that means you could go down to a 2-lane, you could keep the parallel parking on the other side, and you can add a protected bike lane on the other side of the curb. So this street section does allow the final build condition with a northbound and a southbound bike lane on both sides of Fern Street. And then if we go to the next slide is 15th Street, and this shows the increased dedication to add the protected bike lane on Block D. And so in 2015, the bike lane was only anticipated to just be in the road section. And so this does have, again, a varying increase to make it a protected bike lane in the future along Block D at the future park, as well as at the future residential building on Block D. The next slide is we do have an MMTA study. Staff has reviewed it. We are awaiting comments. So hopefully we'll have all of that with more feedback in the future. Are there any transportation questions?
Just one other point on the bike network. Where feasible, we are trying to provide protected intersections on our corners as well, especially at the corner of South Fern and 15th. That is also on the set.
That's a good point. We did not include intersections in our design guidelines. Are there any other questions on the street sections? All right, we can move to the next one, which is the green ribbon. We just kind of wanted to go back and really talk about the connection that we see is this southwest to northeast connection that connects the Virginia Highland Park up to the future Penn Place through the open space. We do believe in and agree with a public process to design all of the open space as a master plan so that all 3 blocks are coordinated, both in designs of the streets as well as designs of the crosswalk locations, as well as with the buildings. Our current proposal is to do that prior to a site plan submission for any one of the future 3 blocks on the Costco side. So that way the first block can come in already with the approval and having that master plan done at that point in time. The next slide really talks about why we're concerned about what an east-west green ribbon pathway would look like. Obviously, we've talked about this a lot. 14th Street is our service connection, and so there will be a lot of conflicts between cars going in parking garages, loading, trucks. There will be a fair number of retail here still, so we'll still have deliveries as well as move-ins and whatnot in these buildings. So we do think 14th Street has a lot of conflicts, and so we want to kind of talk about that. And then next slide is on 13th Street, if we put the green ribbon, a full green ribbon path through here, we do think it would somewhat limit the ability to make this section a celebration street that could close for events, right? Again, don't know that it's the right or wrong answer. However, we do want to talk about the pros and cons. If you go to the next slide, we do think there's an opportunity to do something that's a little bit interesting here that could be different than like the full green ribbon segment, if you will. And so, we want to work with both you and with staff to kind of come up with something that could be creative, because the 3 blocks on the west side of the property are urban condition here, right? And the green ribbon is really seen as a path going through open spaces. And so this is an opportunity to create something that could be interesting through an urban condition. And so what does that look like? Could it be, a double row of trees around the sidewalk? Could I think there are design solutions that we could come up with, but we want to be creative and make sure that we figure out what that is, rather than just saying it needs to be a green ribbon path through there. And so I think really this diagram is to show that we could do it on either of them. We just need to be careful about where we put it. And we're open to suggestions as well as creative solutions.
Can I just add, Abby, just, it may be obvious to the group, since the approved plan was approved by the board in 2015. Obviously, the Pentagon sector plan process hadn't started. The word green ribbon and the concept of a green ribbon hadn't been determined at that point. So I just want to point out, and Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are not conditions that are proposed changes. These potential conflicts and issues that Abby just went through aren't being triggered by our proposed changes. They're just things that have come to light in response to the concept of the green ribbon in the Pentagon City Plan. And we're just wanting to, like she said, flag it for the group. As Matt mentioned, some of these are going to be answers that are going to be more readily at hand, probably in the final site plan phases of some of these buildings. But I just don't want anybody to get the impression that we're kind of like bringing this problem to the development versus what's approved now. And on that note, I just want to say, like, the image that was shown earlier of the approved park being at the corner of 15th and Fern as being part of that green ribbon, we're not trying to do damage to that. It was just back in 2015, there was commentary from some groups about how there was a desired thought on Fern to have retail facing retail, having that building corridor. So we were trying to achieve that, and we believe that having the larger park spaces that are shown on blocks D and F, sort of more interior to the site, are going to feel like a more welcoming, usable space. So I just wanted to make those couple of points real quick while we're on this slide.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is we don't have an answer right now. And I think, Matt was very elegant, but like, we're not going to have an answer. We're not at site plan, right? And so the question is, what can we do? What condition can we write that will make that this happens, but that is something that works both functionally as well as for the community. So it's just something that we wanted to make sure we brought to the table to talk about logistically, because there are conflicts, and so there's pros and cons, and we can go either direction. Are there any questions on the green ribbon? All right, next slide is community benefits. And so really, again, I think that we talked about this a lot last time, is there is a 30% increase in open space. We are going to try to hit the 10% affordable housing, and we are going to add the bike lane. Those were kind of the big things that the sector plan asked for the Pentagon Center site. We will try to hit the 40% tree canopy, as well as add a new southeast northwest green ribbon connection. And then the next slide really goes back to the big 6 items from the sector plan. And I think the thing that's on here that wasn't on the previous is we do believe in following LEED Gold for new buildings. Kimco's current ESG standard is LEED Gold for all of our buildings as well. And I'm sure as that evolves through time, as we build the next step, that will change as well. So we'll be following both what the county requirements are as well as our own internal standards. And that is our last. So
Can I start off with a softball question?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm late, but can you explain the logos that show up in some of the slides?
Thank
I feel
you.
like a code.
You
I feel
can
like I'm
ask,
the only one who doesn't know the answer.
you can ask my marketing people because I actually don't have any idea. I'm just using slide templates. So
It kept changing. I'm like, I just need to decodify it. Like,
I don't think
What about
there's.
Wi-Fi?
You get 12% affordable housing if you can figure it out.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything magic to it other than I just used a slide template that had different ones on there. They're pretty though. Right?
They are.
They
I
are.
think they're pretty.
Obviously eye-catching.
Very distracted.
Some hieroglyphic.
Make something up for the next time.
Yes, the squares mean parks. I don't have any.
This was our submission for the new county logo a couple of years ago, obviously.
All right, the two business people, come on. Thank you. Is that it? You're
Yes,
done with your
that's-
presentation?
Yep, that's everything.
All right. Any clarifying questions or any comments besides the graphic design aspect of the presentation?
On any particular topics?
Well, just from the presentation, if you had anything that needed clarification before we dive into the topics of phasing update.
I was wondering on the slide with the new plan supports all 6 major sector plans, slide 30. It says meeting affordable housing 10% goal and meet 40% tree canopy, but when you were talking about it, you said we will try to do those things. So I was wondering, is this like you're going to try but not necessarily guarantee, or you are going to?
So the goal is to meet both of them, right? So obviously the 10% housing goal, obviously that's a square footage, that'll be a condition, we'll meet that. I think our only hesitation on the 40% tree canopy depends as when we do the public master plan design of the open space, can we actually hit it, right? And so if through that process we decide we need a big open green to do a movie night, well, then I don't know that we can hit 40%. So what the calculations that we've done so far basically show that like 90% of it need to be treated in order to hit 40%. So I think we just want to leave ourselves some flexibility as we work through the master plan of the open space to make sure that we can do both things, right? If it's what's asked, right? So the goal is to hit it. However, we also want to hit what the master plan asks for. So I think there needs to be some push and pull given those two things.
Great. All right. Seeing no one else, no hands online? Don't look like it. Okay. All right. So the first topic we have tonight is phasing update. Any reaction, any comments, any questions about the phasing update? Mr. Slatt.
I will just say, I feel like in the same way that the original submission seemed to have all of the open space kind of stacked into phase 2, this still feels like all of any sort of bike infrastructure that is more useful to the greater community and not kind of serving just the site also feels all backloaded into phase 2.
All right.
I will say that we have reviewed an option to add a bike lane in the existing roadway on Fern. However, with the existing curbs, we cannot make it a protected bike lane. And so there is an option that we could do that. And so I think that's a question of if it's something that is wanted or if everybody just wants to wait until it's the end protected bike lane condition. That is in the design guidelines. We did not show that today. However, we have reviewed it and we have talked about it. So it's something we can kind of decide if that's what we want to do and make that a part of phase 1 as well. But it wouldn't be within our, Costco wouldn't let us move the curbs basically. Right? So we would have to do it in the street rather than protect it.
Good? Yep. All right. Anyone else? Mr. Streiner and then Commissioner Peterson.
Let's have somebody on too.
Yeah, they were up first.
And then
they'd like. I
and
don't want to cut
let's
it.
go. Let's just do it and then we'll go to Ben.
Okay, so this is back to the Costco scenario. If you all remember, I was very passionate about Costco last time. Is there like a separate, I know with the phasing drawings, you have this sort of the phase 1, the phase 2. Is there an alternate set of drawings if Costco decides to renew the lease? Is there a set of drawings, a plan, a schematic that you
can show us if Costco stays versus if Costco goes? And, this may be for later on in the discussion, but can you meet that green ribbon, the sustainability, the green space goals if Costco were to stay?
If Costco were to stay, they would, what we know right now, they would stay the way they are.
Yeah.
They would not, have not told us they have a city design. I know they have a couple, they're trying in LA and some other places, but they've told us no. So if they were to stay, they would stay in their current configuration.
And so how would that impact the phasing of the eastern portion? Because a lot of the green aspects were over there, a lot of the transportation aspects were over there. How does that change the way that gets phased if Costco were to stay?
I mean, you end at phase one, right? Phase two theoretically doesn't happen, right? And obviously that's not what we want to happen, right? So I think there is, you would still have the interim park, and you would still have all of that, and you would still have the north-south Grand Street connection. It would just end at phase one.
Stop there, yeah. And I guess the interim would be a permanent park.
At that point, yes, basically, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good to know.
But just as a reminder for everybody and anybody who wasn't in the first LRPC, there is an end date to the Costco lease at this point. They have extensions.
They have extensions for 20 plus years, and then it's no longer Costco control, it's Kimco control.
Gotcha.
Switches.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That didn't register with me until right now. That changes the game.
The way it works in options, we don't have any say. It's not like it's not like a dual option of we both have to say yes. It is solely a Costco option.
Their discretion.
When they're out of option, the lease terminates, it becomes Kimco.
Right.
We control it.
In 20 years.
20.
I think it's 22.
Yeah.
I think it's 20.
This is a long-term plan, so at all. We're thinking big picture here.
Is that it?
Yes.
All right, Commissioner Peterson.
Since this is an interim park, are you all kind of covering the design process and the building and the maintaining of it? Or is the county covering aspects of those? I'm just thinking the county taxpayers would want to put a lot of money into something that's interim.
We designed the existing park we have today. That's at we call it Grand Street Park, and we maintain it. So this would be the same configuration. We would build it and maintain it.
With the caveat that I'll say, when we come in with the B1 final site plan, I would imagine that staff in the county would revisit that with us, and we would have that conversation we usually have, which is, for a half acre. I don't want to promise anything, Greg, but I have a feeling the county is going to want that to also be a little bit of public. I know Walter is on the phone with parks, but I would imagine that we would likely be asked to go through a public planning process, even for an interim park, given that there's the potential that it could be around for a significant period of time.
Right, and so sometimes the applicant pays for that process.
I would imagine that well, in my experience, we would, because that would be part of the site plan process. That would be folded into the site plan process, and we would have we'd work with staff to have additional meetings. Walter, I'm talking your territory here.
Yeah, no worries, Evan. You're hitting all the points. Yeah, Commissioner Tinley, we definitely work with the applicant, like any other site plan project that we've done that involves a public space. We would try to wrap it in with hopefully the SPRC and do an engagement process with it to get that completed once the projects go into county board.
And then we would, to your other question, Commissioner, about whether it would be, I think you were asking if it'd be who would maintain it. That's usually a conversation. In this case, I suppose it would be a park easements. It's an interim park, and I would suspect the county would have us, the applicant, maintain it.
Great. Done. All right, I will now go to Ben Devanzo.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions, or kind of groups of questions that, if the chair is okay, I'll group into kind of one question and then ask another after, because they're kind of about two different geographical areas. For the area that's around B1 and 14th Street, I'm kind of interested as to why there needs to be that interim street that kind of connects 13th and 14th to the west of building B1, why that's necessary, why there couldn't be access to building B1 from 13th and 14th? And then similarly, if I was understanding the presentation correctly, you were saying B1 would initially have parking access from that interim street, but then it would switch to 14th Street, and I kind of didn't understand that. So that's kind of one set of questions. And then the other is how in this interim situation, Costco currently restricts access to, I guess, what is now 14th Street through their parking lot through gates at Eads, and has been now moved. So it's kind of at the corner of the Milton, and how that would change or not in the interim condition. Would 14th Street be a throughway, or would it not be? So the first question is about that, the area, the interim street, and why it needs to exist, and why there's parking access off it temporarily. And then the second question is about the Costco parking gates.
Okay, so starting with the interim street, the interim street really is there today as a drop-off for the future B1 building, and the parking location hasn't been finalized. We have drawings where the parking is accessed off of the park side. So let me take a step back. When you only build the residential portion of the block, there is not enough width along 14th Street as a building in order to provide an up and a down ramp situation that would be required to meet the parking entrance needs. If you recall, because of the metro station, the blocks along Hayes can only have one level of below grade parking. As a result, we have to have down and up ramps in order to solve the parking needs on these blocks. So when you only build the first phase, that's the residential tower, there's not enough width on 14th Street to provide the loading docks as well as an up and a down ramp. So in order to do that, the alternate situation is, where do you then locate the other ramp in the interim? This scenario shows that second ramp off the interim street. We have a scenario that shows the second ramp off of Grant Street. The issue is, in a long-term scenario, when the park is built, we don't think a ramp going down is appropriate across from a park. So you have to come up with an alternate solution. So this is the alternate solution that would provide the down ramp access off the interim street. And then when the block is fully built out, we would have an on-grade, basically, connection to the down ramp from 14th Street. So you're just moving where your access point to the garage is. Again, we are not at site plan for this block, so this is kind of scenario planning at this point. And so really that's what this is just showing that we may need a garage access here, depending on what we decide to do in the future. That's really the point of the interim street, is to provide some short-term retail parking as well as access to a ramp if it goes off that side. So hopefully, I think that was the first question. Did I answer sufficiently?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate and encourage kind of conversations about how to, if that street's necessary, and if it is, how to make it maybe more like a Woonurf to kind of connect the interim park with that building in that condition, to make it, a park isolated and surrounded by streets on four sides. It's not going to be particularly pleasant. So I think that deserves more conversation. But yeah, thank you.
Agreed. I definitely think a Woonurf would be a thing. And again, the design of that would be finalized with the site plan of the building. And we would have all of those details to hopefully make it feel not like a street, but rather feel like kind of a shared place.
Just real quick, from a staff perspective, to add to that comment that I made, I think they're taking a step back and looking at the hypothetical, we brought it up, if Costco decides to stay, which again, popular people like them, very likely to happen. And if that park were to remain more of a permanent condition, I think that decision alone becomes more critical, in that we want to make sure we start with an expanded version, and perhaps the focus and emphasis is placed on the design of potentially future park space on the rest of the block, such that it can design around the entrance and wherever the parking and loading access is. Because I mean, that could be done.
Right,
knowing if it's there, but I'd hate for that opportunity to, forego the expended park space, given that it very likely could become permanent.
Correct, and I think that's a perfectly good scenario, and at this point, we don't have an answer, so we're just trying to kind of hedge our bets 50-50, one way or the other at this point.
And I think the challenge for us will be if there are drawings associated with this year's PDSP amendment, the degree to which they guide or inform what the expectation or consensus is. And like right now, that seems to be alluding to that we have support for the street, or in fact, maybe that needs to be amended in a way that shows further study is needed and the preference is to get as much park space as possible.
Yeah.
However we want to do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think we can definitely work with that.
Great. And then the second question was the Costco access.
Yeah,
Control.
yes, so as long as Costco is around, the gates as they are located today will stay for access to Costco parking.
The main reason is that's Costco's entrance, and everybody comes in and out of there. And we, as a cut through, it's already, if you've been there, it's already interesting with people cutting across in carts and everything, and it's not a through street. I don't think with Costco's entrance there, it would be a good condition or a safe condition having that as a through street.
Great. All right, Ben, is that good? I'm going to go to Ms. Fuller. Carol, you're on.
Okay, thank you. My comments actually are related to what both Ben and Matt just said because I wanted to talk about the park. I'm pleased to see that since the last LRPC, you've added that interim park in there. But I think we all need to realize that the issue of Costco is like waiting for Godot. It may never happen. And therefore, I would hate to see an interim park be set in stone at the site that it's at right now and the size. And I would go back what Matt just said as well. I wanted to say, I really would like to see that park space expanded more. And even though you've given an explanation for that street, I find that interim street really is not being a good idea. It would be better to expand the park over there. And you did mention the ramp was a problem for you. I made a note of it when you said it in the first place for it. But I would just hate to see anything get set in stone that way. As to the fact that you can't do a park if Costco never goes away. It should be larger. That's my key issue.
Thank you, Carol. All right, the next person is Michael Dowell.
Hi, I think Ben covered most of my question, but I just wanted to check if for the Costco condition, I think we're all focused on how semi-permanent phase one could be. It wouldn't be a through street, but would Costco be restricted from making use of the west side of 14th Street?
So if, are you asking, can customers to Costco come in off of Hayes to 14th Street to access the Costco port? Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. Because
it's Greg. If you didn't hear Greg, that's the condition today.
Okay.
You can turn right in on 14th Street off of Hayes already, and so you can go basically straight down 14th to kind of the gate to go into their parking lot on the other side of Grant Street already today.
Yeah, not many people use it. I would offer that in my experience, Costco got a lot more organized when they really restricted most of the traffic to coming in and off Fern Street. Ironically, when it had more heavy use of the Hayes Street entrance, it actually made the traffic a lot worse in the area. So you might want to keep that in mind.
Yes, it is really kind of the secondary minor entrance. And I do think less people use it. However, there are some people who kind of park in the parking garage who sneak in and out that way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Michael. The next one is Caroline Haynes. Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing the screen, so give me a minute. I'll get there.
Great, thank you very much. I just want to pile on the interim park and that interim road and how important that is to maximize that space because we are waiting so long. So just to second, third, and fourth, the comments that have already been made. And also, I don't think we should be hesitant to be planting trees there. Even if we get trees for 20 years, that provides a huge amount of benefit and will be, some kind of shade tree in the interim. So I think we should think about that. a lot of our parks don't last that long. So that could be a really valuable property.
Great. Thank you, Caroline. Mr. Striner?
One last thing. Maybe, again, in this alternate universe where Costco does stay, there is that surface parking lot outside of Costco that could be redeveloped into a park. I don't know what the terms are with that, but there is a giant parking garage there, and that surface lot is ripe for a possible conversion into some kind of park. I thought of that last time Leo and I talked. It just popped back into my head tonight, so here we are.
Great. All right, we're gonna wrap up the phasing update and roll into transportation, street and bike network and streetscape. What's on the agenda? Mr. Slatt, just as I looked at you.
Shocking. Great. I will pile on a little bit onto the interim street and say I can certainly see why it may need to exist. I'm not sure it would ever need to connect to both 13th and 14th Street. That seems like at least the minimal opportunity there is to, I do appreciate not having the loading facing the potential new park 22 years from now. But it seems like we could probably get away with just connecting down to 14th and not having it connected to 13th. That would give more space for the park. And I think still at least a little bit of pickup and drop off for the building. So you're planning above grade parking for the B1 building at this time? I know that's a little bit into site plan and PDSP, but it's affecting conversation here.
Yes, so B that's residential, that's retail only has 1 level below grade, no above grade. B1 that has the residential and the office tower has 1.5 levels below grade, meaning there's a cone of influence to the metro. And so under the residential building, we can actually go under 2 stories. We cannot under the office building. And so then the remainder of the parking then goes above grade. If I remember correctly, I believe it's 2 stories above grade in the residential building, and it's 4 stories above grade in the office. But don't quote me on that. It's a similar ratio of 1 to 2 for the residential to office.
I know that was the plan in 2015, but now we're in 2022, and the Pentagon City Sector Plan has a pretty clear recommendation against any new above grade structured parking, unless maybe on a case-by-case basis it's built into a slope topography or something like that, which I don't think you have a lot of slope topography here to deal with. I'm not particularly interested in new above ground structured parking going forward, but that'll be a conversation for site plan review. The big thing I wanted to bring up is I think there's possibly a missed opportunity here from a transportation standpoint, in that the fine folks at River House down the street made a very compelling case for a road diet on Joyce Street, which comes around and connects here 15th. And they helpfully included 2023 traffic counts for 15th Street, and they're just as low as they are over there on Joyce, which connects. I think it would solve a lot of problems if we were to knock 15th down to 1 lane in each direction in a shared turn lane. The applicant would not need to dedicate nearly as much right-of-way, or possibly any right-of-way whatsoever, and still be able to achieve protected bike lanes. We could potentially actually get protected bike lanes on the western block, which right now, because it was built out with the Milton, there's really no space there without something giving for that to happen. I think it would be a huge win for the neighborhood from how are we going to fit a green ribbon onto 15th Street? How are we going to fit better bike facilities on 15th Street? How can we get possibly better transportation as part of phase 1 instead of phase 2, right? You can make improvements to 15th Street at that point without eating into Costco's space, right? You could actually do it within the existing right-of-way as just a transportation benefit that is just money rather than a transportation benefit that requires space. The 2023 number for 15th Street is 8,000 cars. The Federal Highway Administration says anything under 10,000 cars a day, average daily traffic is almost always a winner from a road diet perspective. You see, backups, you don't see delays. So that's my big thing that I want to raise here early at the PDSP level is I think we could get wins for everybody if we look at road dieting this section of 15th Street, and it will then nicely transition into a potentially road dieted Joyce Street around past the park and up past Pentagon Road.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Slatt. Pam?
Hi. I'm thrilled that you're breaking up the mega block. I hate mega blocks. I'm looking forward to Arlington Street, which would be wonderful. Your goal is to align the 14th and the 13th with the 14th and 13th. That is a great goal. It feels like Met Park is using the streets the opposite way that you're in Met Park. 13th is more of the loading street, and 14th is more of the pedestrian-friendly retail traffic. And I wanted to emphasize how wonderful 14th Street and Met Park is. The way that I think it's a different surface. It's very clear that pedestrians are welcome there, that we can cross anywhere. And I strongly encourage you to look at that design and see how much of that you can put at 13th and 14th. I was surprised how well it's working. I really didn't think it would work, but it's great. My other suggestion for the conflict with green ribbons is to look at what River House did with Kent Street. The original plan for the green ribbon was to go like between houses in the backyard, and people didn't like that. So they basically are hoping to turn part of Kent Street into kind of a combination of green ribbon and street. And it's gorgeous. I mean, and they did it to just one side of the street, so that might be an option for you if you don't want to do both sides. But the one side of the street, I think it's the west side, it's like a park almost. But it has, the sidewalk and the path. That's a really nice thing to look at. That's it for now.
Thank you, Pam. Anyone else on transportation? Are you putting your hand up?
I can start with something because what you just mentioned will lead into the green ribbon discussion. But I think what we'll see is that between the three blocks, really, Hayes, this block, and Met Park, there really isn't a clean path where we would loading all together. And this one makes the difficulty of picking one versus the other as convenient as we wish it would be. So that's where I think the debate is right now.
I would just note that 13th is where the pedestrian cross of Hayes is today. And at 14th, if we continue it on 14th, you're kind of just delivering them to a median. So that's just one thing to think about.
It's definitely a helpful start.
Lanes. I'm losing track of in the whole area where we're getting northbound and southbound. On each, we're basically doing all the beads from Army Navy up to 23rd, pretty much eventually, as protected bike lanes on both sides.
Correct. So each street will have bike facilities in each direction, in the direction of travel. So not a cycle track like we're proposing on Joyce. It'll be from Army Navy Drive all the way down to 23rd. We also, with the Penn Place project, there was an approval for a portion of Fern Street, bike facilities in the northbound direction. So that would be the block from Army Navy to 12th Street. Obviously, that depends on development timing. I know the TSA project is in, and they have some proposed bike facilities as well. So that would be on the southbound between New 11th Street. I appreciate this, Chris. In my mind, I'm like, I think it's north. I just feel like, okay. Between the new 11th Street and where 12th is. So that is basically the north-south options on the west side of Route 1.
And you're proposing for Fern between 12th and 15th. You're definitely doing protected bike lanes on the west side, and you hopefully can do it on the east side too. And I misread the diagram I looked at. So you're actually going to be losing a traffic lane. So you're keeping parking on both sides?
So the end goal would be that we would build the westbound ourselves, right? And what we're providing would allow for an eastbound lane. However, that's not our property and we would have to get all those things. So that's not currently in our thought that we would build that, but we are leaving, there is room for that.
We want to encourage that. It seems like we're getting a lot of southbound lanes without getting a lot of northbound lanes, and I'd like to see more balance. And once we get to 15th and going south on Fern, there's no plans for any bike lanes, period?
Once we get to 15th, southbound on Fern, that is a true statement. Yes, there are no planned facilities on Fern between 15th and 18th.
All the way up to 23rd?
Correct.
That's
We
too bad.
don't anticipate any redevelopment. Now, the Crystal Houses is coming in, and so that does abut Fern Street, the east, so the northbound side of Fern Street, but that's the future phases of Crystal Houses. I don't remember off the top of my head what they are proposing, maybe.
It's town.
I don't think it's anything though, is it?
Nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then when we go over to Joyce Street.
Right.
With the River House, obviously they are proposing that two-way.
Which is southbound.
Well, it's a two-way facility.
Two-way, okay, okay.
So there currently is northbound on the west coast side. It is a striped facility.
It's always filled with zero cars. It's terrible, just terrible.
It is a striped facility. With the River House, it is a cycle track, so the north and southbound in both directions on the River House side, so the west side of Joyce Street.
And that is going to continue
So that would be
on
from
Little
Army
Joyce, or it just stops when it gets to Little Joyce?
It would be from Army Navy Drive to Little Joyce.
Please.
Sorry, what was that?
Hopefully it's quiet streets after that, allegedly. And for my comment on the east side of Fern, between 15th and 12th, is the parking and Kudo there is terrible. It's going to be really, I hope you get a protected bike lane there, but there's always people double parked and triple parked. It's a mess. Same on 12. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Great. Before we leave transportation, there was a question that Mr. Lantelmi had, Commissioner Lantelmi had, and he wanted to know, we discussed the extent to which vehicles would be allowed on the new internal street at the last meeting. So follow up on what seems appropriate. Are we, any comments on the amount of traffic that we're allowing on the streets or expecting per the conversation we had at our last LRPC?
I don't think we're doing anything to constrain the streets, so there'll be just a lot of what's happening internal to the site. Once you come up Grant and 13th and 14th, it's really local serving traffic that's going to be using those 6 blocks. Most of the traffic that you see today around the periphery will, still be the periphery traffic to get to other facilities, like broader in the area.
Great.
But we didn't see any operational issues internal to the site, stop controlled intersections along Grant Street, so no new traffic signals internal or anything like that.
I was going to ask too, because that made me think, if I'm remembering right, there was a lot of parallel parking spots on the street that was kind of cutting into that. Was there any, I wanted to know like what the logic was, putting all that on the internal streets instead of in the parking garages and all, any other facility around there.
Really, it was just a continuation of the previous PDSP where we had all our streets lined with on-street parking.
Yeah. Yeah, and my thought on that was that if we're trying to make those more pedestrian friendly and, all that kind of thing, having rows of street parking is, and I understand there might be a necessity to it in order, there is a retail component of it, we can't forget that. But, if there's any kind of examining on that angle of it, seeing how much could be preserved for pedestrian access.
So there's 2 schools of thought. First is the retail that you mentioned is street parking is teaser parking. So people use it and think, oh, cool, I'm going to go to that. I'm going to park in this and then I'm going to go to that residence.
Right.
The second school of thought is that when you have parallel parking next to an open space, it actually kind of creates a buffer between the road and the open space. So the open space then feels more protected as a result. So there's kind of, that's why we've left the parking spaces around the parks, because we do have these roads crisscrossing the open space, that it will hopefully create this feeling so you feel more secure
the bike lanes too.
in the open space. Correct, right. So I think there's we haven't eliminated them, A, because we had it before, but also because of kind of the nature and to protect the open spaces. So, I mean, I think there's potentially an option to make them go away. However, I worry that then maybe the park space won't feel as safe, right? So there's that kind of back and forth balance as a result.
And there's also the acknowledgement that as much as some of us would like this to be like a perfect pedestrian's paradise, you know, we still live in a very car-centric world. So there is the reality that we live in.
Correct, and we also live in a reality of, you mentioned this, that like we live in an Uber drop-off pickup world too, right? And so having the ability to have parallel parking also gives us the opportunity to create short-term pickup and parking locations that gives that flexibility rather than blocking the bike lanes, rather than doing all of that. So there is flexibility in that curb management that keeping those parallel parking spaces gives us.
And also, ultimately, these are going to be dedicated county streets. So Joanne and her crew will have, you know, going forward in the future, will have control curb to curb over how that's programmed and like when and if parking goes away and when and if like certain areas get dedicated to some other public use. So it can evolve over time.
Yeah, I mean, even if we have that parking, is something we'll discuss during final site planning. Because that's always the question from the county perspective is looking at, we want to make sure there is parking to have that pick up and drop off. But how many parking spots do we need? You know, if we look at Met Park, you know, they took away a lot of that parking that was on 13th and 14th Street. You know, they kept some of the parking that are closer to the buildings. You know, and without getting too far into the weeds on this one, you know, I could see sort of that similar philosophy here.
Exactly.
You know, let's keep some spaces near those retail entries, residential entries, but where there's a lot of parking near the park, you know, maybe we get rid of those so then we can have bigger park spaces. But during final site plan, that's where we'll have those discussions about what it is. And as Evan was saying, that's totally correct, which is once the parking spaces are there, whether they're public or private, the county will be regulating them. So we will have that ability to decide if they pick up drop off, are they daycare, is it, you know, bus stop, is it a bike share area, you know, what is that space
Food
used
truck
Yeah.
area.
Yes. Mobile vending.
Yes.
You know, what it is. So that's something that, yeah, it can evolve as time, what the space is utilized for. But during the final site plan, the big discussion will be what should that space be and should there be that space for parking?
All right, let me jump in here. We're getting a little bit bogged down on transportation. We do have still two more items on our agenda that I think we need to pay attention to. So I have Carol Fuller and Ben DeVonzo online, so I'll go with Carol first. Carol, if you could keep your comments somewhat brief.
It's just a question for Joanne.
Okay.
Is there any reason that 14th Street cannot be stopped at Grant and turned into just a loading area and a pedestrian way? So they don't go into Costco and out?
In this phase one where Costco still remains?
The 14th Street going up to Grant, can it not be stopped at Grant? Why do you have to allow the people from Costco to enter and exit on 14th Street?
I'm gonna pass that question to the Kimco folks who are operating the Costco.
So that means
today.
Costco would operate basically with one entrance, which would be a nightmare with the number of customers they have coming in and out of there. So it'd be very difficult.
Well, they exit onto 15th.
Well,
She's just referring to the one block segment.
So Carol, if I can try to answer that. So I think it already is there today. So that's a situation that's already being used. But yeah, you're right. Most people come in from 15th and turn left or vice versa when they're going in and out. There is some straight shot through 14 sometimes. So I'm not sure what the issue would be addressing, I guess. If I
The
could.
question was whether there's anything that legally keeps it from being stopped. That was all.
Okay.
Stop meaning like physical barrier stopped or stop?
Yes, at Grant.
So it would be a dead end street?
Yes.
I'll say this, Carol, if you want to send me an email and let me know what, I just want to make sure that we're addressing this. Because are you talking about just in the existing conditions today, regardless of if they build anything now or in the future?
No, for phase one, it was just, there was all this concern about it, and I just couldn't understand why you can't just stop the street so you don't have that traffic. And then you can have more pedestrian.
So you just go to the garage of B1 and then you only have, I get it. So
Right, that's it.
if you essentially stop the street and this becomes not a street, so that all traffic goes east. Yeah.
Oh.
West, sorry.
Well, that would
west
also
on
affect
14th.
That's where
the
Milton
building that.
Right, they have their driveway
Garage
there.
is there, and the loading is there, so it would be very difficult.
I mean, it's something we could talk with Kimco about today. You know, generally, we like to have more options for folks to be able to leave garages. And so that would effectively mean that Milton and whenever B1's built, most likely they have one entrance and one exit off of Hayes, which is, again, from a general transportation perspective, I like folks to have more options.
Okay, just asking the question.
All right, thanks. Ben, do you have a question?
No, I'll pass. Okay.
All
For
right,
the sake
thank
of time.
you. Okay, moving on to green ribbon. I feel like we've talked about that a little bit, but if we have any comments or any questions or any thoughts, remember, you know, LRPC level, SPRC level, we're at the LRPC level. Always a tricky line, I understand. Any hands, anyone in the room? Matt, were you gonna say something?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll start things off. And it's really, I think, in response to the 13th Street connection, the green ribbon, which seemed like it might be predicated on the ability for the site to block that off for events, which the degree towards that's supportable, I'm not sure, but the green ribbon is specifically in the sector plan identified with a menu of options to design it. And we did that strategically because it does pass through private properties, it does pass along right-of-ways. So it's meant to be adaptable and applicable just about anywhere in the Pentagon City. So I've struggled to envision where the conflict might be, regardless of the value of retail or what other uses might be on 13th. There's probably a design solution there that allows us to achieve the full cross-section. And part of that, I think, is also it's much more than just double lining of trees. There are specific elements that I think lead to that element that I think, depending on what's happening on Hayes, what Brookfield might do to the north, that might inform in a river house at the same time some potential test cases of how did they solve it on their site, all of which are unique. There's really no apples to apples comparison to Costco. But I think it's something we want to continue to keep open, particularly since the next phase, when the site plan is submitted for B1, might actually solve that for us and set the stage for the west side or east side, sorry.
I'll jump in here and react to a comment that was made during the presentation. I think, Abby, you mentioned about creativity, about the green ribbon, and I think that's great. Absolutely, I'm always encouraging creativity. The only thing is, I think let's keep in mind that the green ribbon serves a certain function when it comes to sort of fauna, you know, continuity and pollination. And we don't have Bernie Byrne online today, but he could go on about butterfly, blah, blah, you know, and all this connection. So let's make sure as we're designing that, we keep some of those biophilic agenda items that are supposed to be attached to the ribbon. All right, I will go to Caroline Haynes.
Okay, you basically said what I was going to say, that I think when we were talking about it, Matt knows this better than any of us, the green ribbon really is as much a part of those connecting those green nodes as, you know, the actual parks are. And so, yeah, to keep that in mind, that wherever this ends up, it needs to be very intentional that it's contributing to that concept of the green ribbon and really connecting those natural spaces. So thanks, Leo.
Sorry to steal your thunder. Mr. Dowell. Hey, Mike, can you speak up a little bit? You were a little hard to hear when you spoke last time.
Okay. Can you hear me okay now?
It's a little low, but yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so a couple comments. The 14th Street, I do agree that if you apply some really good design measures there, we can get some green ribbon fill there. But one of the things I wanted to point out, just observing, is if you look at the east side of the area, those buildings are all kind of have some very cool outlines to them. And I think it really helps with the green ribbon in the invitation to come into that space. But when you look in the center building on the west side, that's just a box. And I think you might, you know, if you could do something interesting with the northeast corner of that building to kind of ease the way into the green ribbon, it might actually kind of help 13th Street feel more green ribbon. Do you see what I'm saying? See how those three buildings on the right side are all kind of funky shapes? If you could do something to soften that corner at the corner of 13th Street and Grant, it might go some distance to making that feel more biophilic. And then the other thing I wanted to point out, if we could get some, if you could, I wasn't sure, where are there any spots where we actually will have retail literally on the park, not across the street, but on the park? Can you give me some insight into that?
So right now there's anticipated to be retail on the park on F, which basically right where the mouse hand cursor is on the screen right now. And then the current building plan, obviously this is to be determined, is there are also lobbies and back of house, like kind of residential and hotel amenities that would be on the park as well. Those are not precluded to not be retail. But I think right now we're focusing retail on Fern Street and on 13th Street.
Okay. I'd like to encourage you to think more about getting retail directly on the park. Ben DeVonzo and I were talking the other week, and I think that Pentagon Row, or I think it's called West Post, might be the only place in Arlington where you can be eating outdoors at a restaurant and your kids can be playing in the park just a couple of feet away from you, not across the street. And that's really nice for families because they can go eat, their kids can be just kind of messing around in the park and they're not too far away. And I think it's fun, we spend a lot of time thinking about our parks, but we don't get that situation that often in Arlington. So I think you got an opportunity here to think about that. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
That's a great point. Thank you, Mike. And now, Ben, I think you're next. Talk about the green ribbon.
Yes, thanks. Although I strongly agree with what Mike just said, based on our conversation. I wanted to just kind of address in the green ribbon a couple of things, both kind of concern that the green ribbon crisscrosses the parks in the way that it does, which really limits the potential uses of the park once there is a master planning process, and does kind of preclude, for one park or the other, a potential open space process, and kind of, makes it, here's where there should be due to the design guidelines of the green ribbon, which are really great, or which are much more about kind of traversing places. So just kind of expressing some, that would be much better if it went along 14th Street, and that is the real entryway into Met Park on both the east and the west, and kind of encouraging that, and also kind of expressing, going back, to some conversations that happened during the Pentagon City sector plan planning process, and coming from really putting on my Southampton representative hat. Right now, the green ribbon is shown here at the southern end, ends up south, and kind of, well, it's unclear what sort of happens, but it seems like it sort of encourages people to maybe cross the street there, even though there's no crosswalk, and then potentially walking through Southampton's property, which, we are private property. I don't think there's an easement in the pathway where there is now, and so I think we'd have some kind of feelings about a pathway and the design of the green ribbon that encourages people to cross 15th Street in the middle, both for safety reasons and kind of the way that our development is set up.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Commissioner Peterson?
I have a question for staff, kind of about thinking the user experience when they're on the green ribbon. So a lot of the projects that we've been talking about so far, it's a path that cuts through a block. It's not necessarily supposed to be like a utilitarian space to get from point A to point B. It can be used for that, but it's also kind of a poetic experience to interact with nature and get away from the urban feel. So what is the feeling when it's along a sidewalk, when it is really kind of for pedestrians getting somewhere? How is the design experience different when it's along a road where people are, trying to get to Metro really fast versus going through River House, kind of in that background where you might sit down and, read a book or something artistic?
Well, I'm done speaking. I'll see if I can pull up. We actually have a great PDF that our consultants could glance and prepare during the sector plan process that visually, I think, describe much better than I can verbally. But generally speaking, in areas that you just described, there's a variation in the green ribbon where we emphasize the clear pedestrian zone to be widest. If you look at the menu in the appendix of the sector plan, it speaks to kind of a range in feet that the width is expected to deliver. So in those areas, we want that width to be maximized as opposed to the more private sections of the green ribbon where we want the landscape areas to be maximized. And the pedestrian pathway is not as significant there. So there's some of that, but I think there's also the additional buffering that you have. It's, not just kind of utilizing curvatures, but also the right plantings, spaces where you can sit down and kind of, have a rest stop. There's also opportunities for public art, lighting. So there are a lot of different techniques to enhance what we typically might see otherwise in the streetscape environment. So let me dig around. I can pull something up.
I'm going to add on to what Matt was saying while he digs up for his PDF. I think the other thing, and I know, and some folks have kind of touched on it, is as we're thinking about, the green ribbon, it is to connect those green areas. So we had these discussions with Met Place, we had these discussions with Met Park, we've had them with some of these others. It's almost as if you're going to have this path for folks, I'm running late, I got to get there. I just want to get from point A to point B, so I have that straight shot. But I also want to make sure I do have that path. So if I have some time, I want to hang out with my friends, I want to eat lunch. And so making sure we have that, both options, depending on where it is what's going to be important. So like when we look at this, 13th Street, it may not have a lot of curvature, it may not have a lot of, sinuosity, but it may be, maybe the sidewalk is not 8 feet, maybe it's 12 feet wide, maybe it's, not one set of trees, maybe it's 2 sets of trees. So looking at that, but realizing it is going to be probably more of a straight line path A to B. And then when you get to that park area, you have those options. Do I continue on, 14th Street or 13th Street or Grant? But I also have this option potentially, through the park. Again, we look at Met Park, we have a lot of pathways through there, but you also could just go along that street frontage. And so that to me is what we want to make sure we're thinking about when we're designing this area. And as whoever was talking about, we also don't want to limit those options through the park planning process. And so that's going to be that discussion when we do that park planning. Do we want to have a lot of pathways through there, or do we want to have it, make sure that pedestrian route is around the perimeter, and then maybe it's more open green area that doesn't have a lot of pathways through. But we just want to make sure that both of those options are available to folks and they still have that green experience. We don't want them just walking along concrete for 12 feet wide with buildings. That's the last thing I want. And I think I talked enough that Matt found his picture.
Teamwork.
Perfect timing.
Folks viewing this online probably have a better version, but could you minimize the participants tab? I might blow it up. Again, we can post this online, but there's just a series of photos, a lot of precedent images from other cities and jurisdictions where just creative solutions. I'm going to start to scroll down to the solutions. But paving patterns, the type of seating, introducing various elements to the width and the overall experience. As you can see here, I think this is another good one that continues to show up. And the PDF just has tons and tons of examples of what that could look like. Really kind of exaggerating what we typically see on a streetscape environment. And that's kind of when you know you've achieved something that's more intentional, intuitive, and folks can kind of just read, oh, this continues. I can see, the pattern going from block to block.
Great. Anything else? All right. No hands up online, no hands up in the room. We will transition to community benefits. Anybody want to start that conversation off? No questions. All right. Well, I mean, it is a little tricky to talk about community benefits at LRPC level, right? Like, anything very specific. But not seeing,
It might be worth discussing if people would prefer the 90% of this open space having trees on it in order to get 40% tree canopy versus maybe using the park for something else? Or is that too early to discuss now?
It is a little bit, I guess, just thinking out loud here, it seems a little bit more park master planning, but it doesn't hurt for us to have that conversation and provide some direction for the team, as they start to put pen to paper before we even got. So do you want to start off that conversation about balance?
I think it's like an important question that might already be decided by the time, like some of the, I guess it's phase 2, so.
Yeah, no, that's
probably
my
pretty
point.
far out.
I think maybe I'll call on Ms. Haynes if she had anything to add about orientation that she's willing to impart on open space versus trees and plantings and how to achieve a sort of sweet spot on that plan.
Yeah, I could opine on this for a long time, a lot longer than we have for this meeting. But I would just note that we do have Virginia Highlands just, down the street. And so a lot of those recreational opportunities are there. And so, this could be a really cool opportunity for some significant tree canopy. And, I think the fact that we have Met Park is such an awesome example of what can be done in a park. We can certainly key off of that and make sure we're building on this success. And, after 20 years, no telling what that's going to look like.
Great. Thank you, Caroline. Tony.
I think this is more of a comment, but on that thread, you all mentioned the movie night in the park, and it took me to Alethea Tanner Park in DC. That's a comparable one that is designed to host sort of public events. And I think the comment that Virginia Highlands Park is right there is a good one. There's already this very massive green space with a lot of trees. So I think my personal opinion is that, I think it's fair to keep it open, to leave it open for public events, public programming, that kind of thing, make it that kind of third space that a lot of modern day architecture doesn't really have. So
I'm sorry, just to clarify, I may have heard her comment the opposite way. I thought she was saying there were a lot of facilities and structured recreation.
That is true.
Over. Okay.
Yeah, I that was my own take on it. But yeah, there is a lot of green space over there as well already. Not so much tree, but yeah.
Sorry, Tenley just asked a question. If trees on the roof of a building count towards, sorry, I'll get to those in a minute, but I think it's a good question. Does trees in the roof count toward tree canopy? We're not sure.
Walter, is that something that you can answer for us?
Hey, Jen. Yeah, Leo, I have to get back with forestry on that one. I don't believe so, because I want to say it's ground coverage that usually counts, but I'd have to double check with forestry and get back to you.
All right, thanks, Walter. Caroline?
Yeah, my understanding is that you can get kind of understory trees on roofs, and depending upon how high they are and stuff, but it's very difficult to get any kind of mature tree. And so it's counting for tree canopy is probably not going to work, even though there's tremendous benefits from having rooftop gardens and access and all of that, but not necessarily from a tree canopy perspective.
Great, thank you. All right, I will go to Carol. I think you're next.
Yeah, I realize this is beating a horse there, but on community benefits, expanding that park across that interim street, taking that interim street away, making it a green ribbon, and following up on Mike Dowell's concept of the retail, with that being a non-recreational, but just a place for people to play. I think that would be a community benefit that we would all like.
Thank you, Carol. Ben?
I'll make a couple comments and then have a couple questions. On the trees, VHP, Virginia Highlands Park, is going to have a master planning process. So it'd be, I think, very helpful to, and odds are the timing of the big parks, that's going to happen afterwards. So, the future of whether Virginia Highlands is going to be more forested or more recreational is going to be decided in 3 or 4 years in theory. So I'll flag that for consideration. And I think, it's an important conversation. And certainly, right, there's 2 areas of parks, and might be that maybe the northern one is a little more active and the southern one is a little more passive. My questions about the community benefits and especially the interim park are, and certainly agree with what Carol said about expanding the space, is how the kind of county does the kind of calculations with the interim space in terms of community benefits. How much of the value of that is determined, given that it's a temporary space, it's a temporary park. So it's more of a question for staff about kind of how they value that or don't value that. And then also whether the intention here and whether kind of what would go to the county board is, as has kind of been done elsewhere in the area, like a cross-site community benefits package that kind of gets approved now, or if it's going to be kind of site plan by site plan.
I can start by just signaling that the approach I would imagine staff would take is to establish options whereby assumptions are made in realization that that interim space could become permanent under one scenario. And I think that might inform the evaluation and the way in which we may carry that forward and be prepared to use that as an informing element for future negotiations when the eastern side comes in. So some of that I think is still ahead of us. And the values, of course, may be very different when we're ready to have that conversation. So.
Is that good, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I would guess the point I sort of want to make is, I hope, right, we don't put, in terms of community benefits, right, it's always a kind of it's a fight that's frustrating for neighbors because, you're fighting for backroom deals and, for better or worse. And, I hope we don't put too much eggs in the basket of a temporary park versus things that are going to provide a longer term benefit for the community, while also saying, temporary parks is, if you look at Crystal City, can last for decades. So I think it's an important kind of consideration.
Great. All right. Thanks, Ben. All right. Anyone else on community benefits? Okay. I will open the floor for any comments, thoughts, questions before we wrap up.
Sorry, I'd also asked whether this is going to be a site-wide community benefits package versus site by site.
Did you hear the question?
I think it's going to be by phase.
Thanks.
We have to see how much of the B1 is being proposed, make an evaluation at that point. But I think this phasing diagram does inform what will be at play with the new street segments, the park space, and the onset affordability.
Great. Whose hand is that? I can't.
David O'Brien. He's not an LRPC member.
Okay. David, if you want to do public speaking, we will write your name down and we'll give you 2 minutes in just a little bit. Chris.
I just forgot to say during the green ribbon conversation, I kind of agree. I think 13th Street should be able to be workable as a green ribbon connection. I do understand what you're saying about wanting that tight street section for retail facing retail, but I think the green ribbon also has an opportunity to bring people to 13th Street as kind of a draw and a destination that could offset any kind of loss from having to have a wider street section or having to not have on-street parking on one side or something like that. I think, especially given where the existing mid-block crossing is at Hayes, that 13th is probably a good solution. But also, if we road die 15th, we can do room for green ribbon on 15th, and then maybe we don't have to have one on 13th left. Also,
so many options.
Also that. Throwing that out there.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Is there an estimate of the potential population increase that would result from the development?
Abby?
I'm trying to think how many units it is, and then we could guesstimate it's, maybe 1.5 on an average, because we have not done a kind of a one bedroom. We haven't done any sort of mix at this point. Really, it's a square footage. So obviously, you had the numbers. I think it's like 100. think it's 1.2 million square feet of additional residential in the 3 towers. And so if you basically say that's an additional 1140, however, that includes the units that are already built, right? So once you factor that in, I think it's an additional 800 units on site. And so that's, 800 times 2 is 1,600 people, right? So we're somewhere between 800 and 1,600 people on average. But again, that we're very far from having any idea how many actual units would be in these.
Very ballpark. Great. Any other thoughts or comments? Well, with that, thank you so much. Thanks staff for running the meeting for us and prepping all the work. Thank the volunteers for coming on a not too bad of a night, really, weather-wise. And thanks to the applicant for providing all this information. We look forward to seeing this project at the next phase.
David
And we
O'Brien.
have public speakers. Sorry. I'm forgetting. I'm wrapping up too early. All right, public speakers. Thank you all. I know people started raising their hands and I'm like, what? No, fair enough. Public speakers. Who do we have on?
I think there was Daniel. Is his hands up? He put his hand down.
Sorry about that. My fault. Yes. All right.
David, yes.
David O'Brien.
David O'Brien, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you. I enjoyed the presentation. I just wanted to say I agree with some of the transportation folks about potentially doing a lane diet for 15th Street and trying to reduce the amount of street parking in the area. We're within a quarter mile of a metro station that serves 2 lines, and there's a large parking structure over the Pentagon City Mall. So I think that's generally more beneficial, makes it easier to hit the 40% tree coverage target, and would give you a little more park space. One more transportation comment. With the lane diet, I suppose you could consider putting down roundabouts at 15th and Fern and 12th and Fern to reduce the signalized intersections, would probably help with traffic flow too, and obviously make things safer. That's all.
Great. Thank you. And did you want to?
I did, yeah. Jeff Williams, Arlington Ridge. I walk in the neighborhood a lot. I love Met Park. One of the things I really like about Met Park is the really generous sidewalk there. It is just, it's fabulous. And I would like to see a similar facility on Hayes. There's seating, there are trees. It's not a green ribbon per se, but it is a really good pedestrian facility. So I encourage you to look at what you can do to improve that pedestrian experience. And then at the ARCA board meeting, one of the members brought up concerns about pickup and drop off along Hayes and cars impeding Metroway buses. And this may be more for the county transportation folks. But 12th Street Landing is coming in as well. And so the concern was, what and how is PUDO going to be accommodated for people who want to drop people off in the metro and are just going to stop and block some of our transportation stuff. So, and then on the open space for movies, I will just say that there's open space in that park, which they had planned on, I think, programming movies in. And Penn Place had talked about programming movies and some of that open space. So there's lots of kinds of parks that are already kind of thinking about that. And therefore, I actually would prefer to see more trees and less open space. And my comment on Met Park is I love Met Park, but there's too much hardscape for me. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you very much. All right. With that, I think now I can actually close the meeting. And thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you. We won't see you because this is the wrap up from the LRPC, right? So this is it for LRPC. We might see you at an SPRC meeting in the near future. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks for
Oh,
they had talked about it.
Yeah.
They did, but
Someday I'll need it. Well, Jim.
Yes. So they turned that into turned into it.
Right, yeah.
And so they have.
Sorry.
But